Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing yet another video talking to you about an optic from Primary Arms. If you've been following my channel for any length of time, you know that I'm a big fan of what these guys are doing, and this is far from the first product I reviewed from them. Now, right out the gate, I want to get my relationship with Primary Arms out there. The first several optics that I purchased from, probably the first 3 or 4 that I purchased from Primary Arms or that I got from Primary Arms, I purchased myself with my own money, paid full retail price for, and was really impressed with. Once I started doing reviews of them though, they started getting in contact with me. We started working together. They would provide me optics at no cost. There was no money changing hands, but they would provide me with optics to review. And then more recently, I've become closer with Dimitri, the guy who actually designs the ACSS reticles, and he has then been providing me with optics to do my reviews. So again, no money changing hands, but I do want to put my biases out there that I do have a relationship with some of the people over there at Primary Arms, although they did drop me from their affiliate program, so do with that information what you will. Now, as far as my experience overall with the products from Primary Arms, I have had well over a dozen different optics from Primary Arms, including red dots, low power variable optics, as well as some of the higher magnification optics. In fact, I've got one of their more powerful scopes currently in testing on a 6.5 Creedmoor bolt action rifle, and all of my experience has been overwhelmingly positive with all Primary Arms products, regardless of the actual price point. Just the actual end user performance in classes has been phenomenal. So how does this new optic hold up? So this is the new SLX 25mm red dot. I've got it in a couple different iterations. This is the one that I have the most time with and the most rounds through. This is just the simple red dot. We will talk about one of the other options later on in the video though. Let me just go ahead, cut in some shooting footage with this thing in use, and then we'll jump into what my experience has been so far. Now, before digging into what my experience has been, I do want to go over some of the features of these red dots. And regardless of which model you get, the external features are going to be the same. It's just the internal features that are going to be different. Just to have better contrast against my shirt, I'm going to grab the other one that I have here handy. So now we're on my SLR 107 CR SBR with a fantastic paint job done by Tactical Cabbage through the McCluskey Arms Company. I'll have links to his Instagram down below. So now we are back to how it would come out of the box. We have the factory mount, which is compatible with any of the Aimpoint T1, T2, H1, H2 mounts. So I can use whatever mount that I would like. So if I wanted to go with a 193 height mount, I can, with a little caveat later. If I wanted to go with just the factory mounts, I can, which also come with risers to give me a couple variations in actual height over bore, which is a nice thing to have straight out of the box. The factory mount does not have a QD system, but again, given the fact that it is compatible with any of the Aimpoint bases out there, it is something that is very easy to get a hold of if that's something you wanted to do. We do have the windage and elevation, turrets capped with the tool built into it, the little driver bit to be able to adjust them up and down. They are not captured, i.e. they don't have the little wire bands holding them in place. However, the more time I spend with those captured caps, the more I despise them. They always just seem to not want to let me do whatever it is I want to do with them. And the reality is I've never lost a cap with the many optics that I've used. So to me, it's kind of a non-issue. Granted, I'm not fighting over in Europe or East Asia, so you know, my experience is limited, but again, I have never run into that actually being an issue running through several training classes. Now, moving on to the other side here, we do have our rheostat for adjusting brightness. Now, this is where one of the cool features, I think, of these SLX red dots come into play here, and that is, in the past, when you have the auto shut-off optics from companies like Primary Arms, HoloSun, SIG, any of those guys, they just have the electronic up and down brightness buttons. They don't usually have the kind of rotating rheostat to adjust brightness. This one, while it still has that, typically again, meaning I don't have my auto shut off, this one still maintains that auto shut off capability. And again, 50,000 hour battery life that we've come to expect from the red dots from these companies. So that is a really great feature where I have very easily identifiable brightness settings. I can tell just from a glance where I'm at and if I need to go up or down, or if I have range of adjustment left. But I still get that auto shut off. So when it's sitting in my safe, when it's sitting behind me at work to use for show and tell, I'm not worried about wasting my battery. Now, I personally leave my optics on a brighter setting than medium, so I don't get the full 50,000 hour battery life. I've been getting about, well, really the one that you saw earlier in the video is the only one that's run out of battery so far that I've had to replace. That one went out at about 7 or 8 months in, and I've actually replaced it just, I've replaced that one once, and I did actually replace this one once. I can tell because of the scratches on the side of the battery cap. And I knew I replaced batteries twice, but it was on the two different optics. So for those of you who don't know, when it comes to the 50,000 hour battery life, that's measured at the medium setting, and the relationship between brightness and battery life is not linear, it's logarithmic. So the higher I bump that up, instead of it being, if it's 5 years at medium, it's not 3 years at the all the way bright, it's like a couple months at the all the way bright. So take that into consideration. If you want to turn it all the way off, you can. I just like to leave it on a pretty, you know, ballpark borderline high setting, just so it's always there when I need it. And then I typically just proactively change out my batteries every 6 months, as long as I can remember to do that. But then the kind of other thing that I want to talk about here is obviously the namesake of these dots, and that is the 25 millimeter diameter here. So for those of you who have experience with other optics on the market, the Trijicon MRO is also a 25 millimeter objective. However, it does, I feel, perceived to be different than this one. So the MRO is 25 millimeter at the objective. However, on the ocular end, it is a little bit narrower. On this one, it maintains that 25 millimeter diameter the entire way through, which, while you still get the same field of view, I think that mentally we perceive that you get more sight picture obscuration from this as opposed to the MRO, because as you're looking through the MRO, depending on where it is located on the rifle in front of you, you have the body bowing out with your line of sight, so you don't see as much of that sidewall. With this, because I have the 25 millimeter all the way through, I'm seeing a lot more of that sidewall. I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe I'll try to diagram it in my editing software, but probably not. Hopefully you guys will understand what I'm saying. Basically, I see more of the internal wall on the rear end here versus something that's opening as I'm looking through it. So it just is a more natural line of sight, I guess. I don't know. I'm probably butchering my explanation of that, but hopefully some of you, at least out there, understand the point that I'm trying to make. Now, I do have to say that when we're talking about the 25 millimeter objective, for me with red dots, objective size isn't tremendously important. It's important, but to me, there's other things that are more important, especially if we're talking about putting it on a long gun, a rifle, or like a braced pistol or something of that nature, just because I have all of my biomechanics lining myself up with that optic. So as long as I have a reasonable sized lens, I'll be able to very easily find that dot because all of my muscle memory is getting me behind that dot. Now, obviously there are exceptions if I'm shooting from unconventional shooting positions or when I'm shooting with night vision, things get a little bit more complicated. So a little bit of a bigger viewing field is nice, but in my honest opinion, that, 20 versus 25 millimeter objective lens isn't going to make or break my sight picture in all likelihood. But at least in theory, on paper, that larger objective diameter is going to let me find that reticle a little bit faster, especially if we're running the ACSS reticle, which again, we'll touch on here in a bit. So since we've got the general features out of the way, I want to talk about what my experience has been with this thing overall. And I brought this one back on because this is the one that I've spent by far the most time with. You've probably recognized it if you've been following, again, my channel more recently. This was on my Midwest Industries 10.5-inch AR pistol. Put 1,000 rounds through that thing with this optic on there. I have since traded that pistol out so that I can get one of these PWS piston uppers. It's one of their 11.85-inch barrels. Been playing around with this one for quite a while with this optic. I just recently switched to one of these integrally folding lowers. We'll see how that performs as time goes on. I'm hopefully going to be taking this through a class next month. But with all that said, I've got probably 1,600 to 1,700 rounds through this optic alone, and then a couple hundred rounds through that one there on my AK. I also actually have a third one that I've been running through a 9mm CMMG Banshee. So all said and done, I have about 2,000 rounds through these SLX optics. And I have to say that I've been really impressed. Now, as I alluded to earlier, I don't get the advertised battery life of 50,000 hours, but I also admittedly keep my brightness at a higher level, and then I'm also using my guns fairly frequently, so that kind of shake awake feature where it's off in my safe, it's usually not off for very long because my guns are constantly being played with, especially when I'm at work, bringing my guns in for show and tell, basically showing customers how us employees set up our guns to help give them ideas on how to set up theirs. My guns are moving around a lot, so my optics are on a lot, hence the lower battery life. But again, kind of something that can just be expected when you do what I do. Now, one thing I was worried about when I first started testing it with the larger objective diameter is just the lens getting dirty, or especially like water spots, because I do shoot in the rain, contrary to what some of the people in the country do, or even people here in Oregon do. People are surprisingly fair weather shooters. I thought that things would get dirty enough that it would be hard to see just because there's more space for stuff to accumulate on. And I can honestly say that that hasn't been an issue. Now, I haven't gone out of my way to try to see how much gunk I can get in there and still see through it, but just through organic use, through, again, on this one, about 1,600 to 1,700 rounds, it just has been a non-issue. It's been a really nice thing to not have to worry about. And then also I should probably point out, since I haven't already said in this video, I do have this on a absolute co-witness height mount. Now, because of the taller body diameter, if you have an absolute co-witness height, it'll sit higher than your traditional 20mm red dots at an absolute co-witness height because, again, the body is taller. So this is closer to like a 193 height mount, just a little bit shy of that. So if you do plan on using aftermarket mounts, just keep that in mind, that this is not your typical like T1, T2 body. So it's going to sit taller than whatever the like measured distance is on the mount that you buy. So just keep that in mind. I still do get a kind of bottom co-witness with this one, with my fixed front sight and my rear sight. So in fact, when my battery died, however long ago that was, I was able to flip to my irons and still see through it, even with the taller mount here. So I guess, again, do with that information what you will. So I guess to summarize, my experience with these has been just like my experience has been with all of my other primary arms optics, and it's just been, it's performed well enough that I haven't had to consciously think about it. So to kind of hopefully explain that a little bit better, the tools that are the best are the ones that you're not having to constantly think about to make sure that they're still working. If everything just works, I'm not having to think about it. The gun's just doing what I need it to do. I'm using it in a way that I need to use it, and I'm not having to focus on, oh man, I wish this dot was brighter. I wish it was dimmer. I wish it was bigger. I wish it was smaller. I wish it was at a different height. I wish it had different features. It's just there and it does what I needed to do. So it's been almost like a passive participant in this in the best way possible. So, and really it shouldn't be a surprise at this point. Primary Arms has been pumping out optics at a really high quality level for a long time. With how flooded the market has been with Primary Arms optics, if there was a fatal flaw in the system, it would have prevented itself by now. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I know that have Primary Arms, Holosun, SIG, red dots that just run and run and run through classes and through some pretty hard use. Now, if you're gonna be deploying overseas, sure, spend the money on an aim point or a Trijicon. But for me, where, you know, again, while I'm not having that deployment mindset in hand, I still perceive this as a fighting gun, something that I would trust my life to. I have no hesitations running these Primary Arms optics. Again, they've just performed so well for me through various scenarios and environments, rain, sleet, snow, sun, everything in between, through classes, through some pretty hard use, getting banged around. Before this was painted, it was pretty scratched up and dinged up, and again, it just kept on ticking. And I really just, again, I can't say enough of how much confidence I have in these products. And hopefully that'll mean even more when, again, I reiterate, I'm not even an affiliate for these guys anymore. So when you buy these, I don't even have a link to get money from that. So all this is just, again, my genuine opinion. Not that being an affiliate would change that at all, but just so you know even more so, that, again, I have no financial gain here from saying that these are good optics. Now, as I've mentioned a couple times, there are a couple variants of this, and this is where I think we should start talking about price. Again, Primary Arms, SIG, Holosun, all of those guys have really set a standard for where optics need to be able to come into the market to be competitive. And I can say I checked Primary Arms' website immediately before making this video, and at least as of the time of filming this, these are right around like 160, 170 for just the standard 2 MOA red dot. However, as I have also said, they do have a second reticle option. So for the one with the ACSS reticle, this one is still under $200 at about 180 or 190, somewhere in there. And you get a far more robust reticle option. Now, some people aren't going to be crazy about how much is going on. Honestly, I don't get it. People complain about how much is going on in the ACSS reticles, and it's like, well, use it and you'll realize that all of that stuff is there for a reason, and it's really, really usable. Again, I've said it in every ACSS video up to now, and I will continue to say it. The ACSS reticles that Dimitri is making are by far the best reticles on the market, hands down, regardless of price. There's a reason that Trijicon puts ACSS reticles in their ACOGs, and there's a reason that companies that are getting military contracts for their LPVOs are using things that are nearly identical to the ACSS reticles. I would say almost putting them in legal jeopardy, similar to the ACSS reticles, but I'm not an attorney, so what do I know? But the fact that you can get something like this still under $200, that's going to pair really well with a magnifier, so you can really take advantage of those holdover settings, is going to be really nice. And they do also have reticle options now. I can't remember if it's in this or if it's in their new GLX. prism sight, but they have 9mm versions as well, which would probably be better on that CMMG Banshee. But again, totally usable as long as you know what your ballistics do in comparison to the reticle. It's very, very usable, very fast to pick up. So again, when we're talking unconventional shooting positions or night vision shooting, having that big horseshoe makes it very easy to pick up and guide your sights onto target. And again, just makes it so I have to do as little thinking as possible to be able to use the firearm in the way that I want to at the time. And again, that's about the best praise I can give something is A, it's on guns that I'm trusting my life to, and B, it works so well that I'm not even having to be conscious of it being there. It's just doing everything I need it to do without having to think about it. So with that being said, if any of you guys have experience with the SLX line of red dots from Primary Arms, definitely throw your experience down below. If you have any other experience with Primary Arms optics in general, go ahead and throw those down below. Again, I've done a lot of reviews on these guys, and I will continue to, because in my opinion, these guys are bringing the best bang for your buck out there on the market. And I think that a lot of people who maybe are critical. I can say a lot of people that I know in the past who have been critical have been won over through their own experience with it, and I know that will continue to happen as these proliferate themselves deeper and deeper into the market, and I, again, think that's a good thing. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and throw those in the comment section down below. I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. I do also want to say thanks to my patrons over on Patreon. While these optics were provided at no cost, I did have to put a lot of rounds through these guns to be able to test them to the point where I can feel comfortable doing a review on it. And the people over on Patreon are helping to make that happen. So thanks to them for that. Because of that, I do post all my content over there early, as well as doing some exclusive content. We do live streams, we have a Discord server, we do a bunch. If any of that stuff sounds appealing, or you just want to financially support the channel, definitely head over to Patreon. But anyway, with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching. Also, for real, make sure you check out the Tactical Cabbage. He did a really killer job on this similar pattern to the Swedish M90, although legally distinct pattern for the Swedish M90, and really brought this AK SBR together, again, with the help of the guys over at the McCluskey Arms Company. Again, links to those guys down below as well.